Hi everybody, this is Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made for a Punched Out Thursday to Die For. This is a hop where we use our dies and our punches to create scrapbooking layouts. I'm showing you some of the papers and embellishments I plan to use on this layout. I had purchased some items from another scrapbooker's stash, and there was a bag that had a couple of papers and a few embellishments in it, and I decided to try to make a layout with just those papers, the embellishments, and then a couple of other embellishments that I had in my stash. In the end, I mainly used the embellishments that went along with these papers. As you saw, there were no full sheets of paper. Most of them were in smaller pieces, but there was one piece of paper that still had a branding strip on it, and it said Prima Tea-Thyme collection. I think that most of the papers are from that collection, although I don't think that the yellow paper that you'll see in a little while is, even though it matches really well with the collection because the pattern on the B side didn't look anything like these other papers. I played around with combinations of all of these papers for a while until I decided that I was going to have this really pretty rose pattern on the right and then a smaller strip of gray paper on the left. The first punch that I use on this layout is an EK Success scallop punch. This is a larger scallop. I remember I purchased this years and years ago after watching a Chamel video, and I've been using it pretty regularly ever since. I also use this Fiskars punch quite a bit. This is a smaller scallop. I'm going to layer the yellow scallop on top of that darker gray scallop. And since I had planned on tucking some borders into the area between the two pattern papers, I didn't put the adhesive all the way up to the edge on the larger paper. I used some Distress ink in Vintage Photo, and I inked the edges of both of these border strips. Several months ago, I went to 2 scrapbooking yard sales on the same day. I've never been to any scrapbooking yard sales in all of my years of scrapbooking, but there just happened to be 2 on the same day. They were both in Connecticut, and I would say they were probably about 40 minutes apart from each other. I got these materials at the second yard sale. The woman there was getting rid of all of her scrapbooking items, and she was switching over to digital scrapbooking, and I was happy to pick up some items from her. I bought quite a few things, and I wasn't sure if I should pick this bag up because there weren't too many papers in it. But I was thinking I really liked the papers that were in it, and it would be a challenge to use the remaining papers and the few embellishments to make a page. Now I have those 2 border strips tucked in and I have everything attached down, and I'm going to start working on my photo cluster. First, I trimmed off a little bit of one of the border strips that was hanging over the top of the layout, and then I inked the edge of that. Now I'm going to start working on my photo cluster. I grabbed these 3 pieces of paper from the scraps that I had, and I didn't cut any of them. These were the sizes that these pieces of paper already were. I once again used the Distress ink in Vintage Photo, and I ink all of the edges. There was a banner strip among all of these scraps of paper, and I thought that this would be a good addition tucked behind all of these pieces that I already have on the page. So I had to cut it a little bit shorter because it was the entire length of the page. So I used my pencil, I marked where I wanted to cut it, and then I used the top part of the banner as a template so that the top and the bottom would match when I cut the fishtail into the bottom. Well, now it's time for me to introduce a photo into this layout. I have this photo of my daughter Danielle, and I used a die that I had in my stash that is to the left of my mat. That's, I believe, an unbranded die, and then I inked the edges of that as well. I ended up switching out the gray paper that was there before for this larger square piece of gray paper. I liked the look of the gray, but it just had to be a little bit bigger to fit all the way around that frame. Then I'm so sorry, my camera stopped recording because I have too many videos stored on it. But what I did when the camera was not recording was I created a yellow mat for my photo. I used some strips of paper and I put them all around the outside edge of a square piece of paper that was just slightly larger than my photo. I didn't have any more yellow paper, so I just used the strips along the edge, and that was just enough to give me that little yellow mat. Now I'm using those flowers that I purchased along with these papers, and I'm also using a title that I bought, I believe, in Michael's quite a few years ago. I see these exact ones for sale now at Dollar Tree. Then I arrange the flowers in 3 clusters. I have one that's to the left of the title, one that's on the right-hand side of the layout, and another one that's on the lower left-hand side. None of the flowers that I'm using is alike. They are different colors and different sizes and different types of flowers, but they all go together. The colors all coordinate with the pattern papers. So I'm guessing that these are probably Prima flowers that match these papers because they really go with them very well. I use gel glue to attach them down to the page. I didn't mention before that I put a gray mat behind the banner that's going down the center of the page. I didn't end up liking the darkness of that mat, so I take those pieces of gray paper off, but I do that after I'm done with the video, but you will see the final layout at the end of the video without the gray. I love to have contrast in my layouts, but in this particular layout, I thought that was a little bit too much contrast and it wasn't needed. And the reason that I took the gray paper off after I was done with the video was that I didn't realize how much I didn't like it until I started taking photos of my layout, and then I made the decision then. Now I'm adding some branches to my flowers. I wanted to use some of my Elentina Tessar craft dies that I love to use with these kinds of flowers, but I couldn't find them anywhere. I know they're around, I will find them, but instead I use these, once again, unbranded dies that I had in my stash, along with some Tattered Angels Glimmer Mists. I used 2 different colors. One is called Forest Deep and the other one is called Money Tree. I die cut these branches out of an inexpensive cold press watercolor paper, and then I just began dipping them into the sprays. I wanted all of the branches to look like they went together, but I didn't want them to be exactly alike. So I began dipping these branches into the paint, and they all came out a little bit different. Some of them are a little lighter and some of them are a little darker. And then after I was done, I used the Distress ink once again to ink the edges of all of them. That also helps them look like they go together. Well, now I'm ready to place these branches on the layout. I'm going to tuck them into the flower clusters. The flower cluster on the upper right-hand side of the photo is the smallest of the clusters, so I'm only going to put 2 branches around those flowers. And then the other 2 clusters are a little bit larger, so I'm going to include 3 branches in those clusters. I usually use a thick, smooth cardstock for my die cuts. For this layout, I knew that I wanted to make these leaves a little bit darker than usual. I usually use Distress Oxides to color my die cuts, but with the Distress Oxides, I can't always get the color as dark as I would like it to be. But with the sprays and the watercolor paper, I was able to get a nice, rich, dark color that I think works well for this layout. It's time to add some pearls to my layout. I have 2 different colors of green that I'm going to use in several sizes. I also have some light pink pearls that I'm going to incorporate into the layout. I use my tweezers to help me place these pearls because they're rather small. I put some pearls on the banner, and then I use some very small pearls in both green and pink, and I place them all around that die cut frame. I only had one size of these pink pearls. I had a couple of different colors of pink, but this was the only one that went really well with this layout. I'll have to be on the lookout for some light pink pearls because I use them a lot. I also put one of those small pearls on that little sentiment that says joy at the top of the page, which I snuck on at some point, and that was an embellishment from my stash. Although I had placed all of those branches down, I hadn't glued them onto the page. I just wanted to look at them for a little while before I committed to where I had them placed. And now I'm using some gel glue to attach them down. Next, I wanted to add some touches of Prima flourishes to the page. I don't know if you remember these. They were popular a while back and I absolutely love them. And I still buy them when I see them because I will still use them. I love them. I looked through all the flourishes that I had, and I thought that this particular one matched really well with the colors in these papers. And I had already used one of the two flourishes in this pack, but I thought that it was just enough for this layout because I didn't want to over embellish. So I cut the flourish into different pieces and I began to arrange them. These are self-adhesive and they're very sturdy so that when you pull the backing away from them, they are still strong and they won't flop over like some of the other flourishes that I've used do. And then I thought it was really funny because I went to throw the packaging away and I realized that these are the matching flourishes for this collection. They also said Tea-Thyme on them. I didn't even realize that these flourishes were made to go with different collections. I was really glad that I had this particular one. I thought it was quite a coincidence. I didn't want to keep the title the brown color that it was, although I didn't think that was a bad color, but I looked at the layout for a while and I decided that I wanted it to be a dark gray. I'm using an embossing powder made by the Powder Keg, and the name of the embossing powder is Gilded Robin's Egg. It's kind of a marbled gray color. So I used some liquid adhesive and then I covered the title with embossing powder, and now I'm heat embossing it with my heat gun. I always like to repeat the embossing process at least once so that I'll have at least 2 layers of embossing powder. On this particular title, I ended up embossing it 3 times because I had a spot or 2 that I wanted to cover up after I embossed it twice. I find that sometimes when the embossing powder is still really hot, you can pour more embossing powder over the top. You don't have to add additional glue, but that doesn't always work. It depends on the embossing powder. I allowed the title to cool, and now I'm adding some gel glue to the back of it, and I am putting it right at the top of the layout, resting on that piece of pink paper. And then as a final touch, I decided to add 1 Prima butterfly to the top left-hand side of the layout. And now this layout is complete, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you for sticking with me until the very end. Please take a look in the description box. You'll find links to the channels of Sonia, Kathy, and Ronnie Sue. They will also have some Punched Out Thursday to Die For videos for you. They are wonderful scrapbookers and such sweet people. I know you'll enjoy watching what they've created. Thanks again for watching, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.